Well, good morning, everyone. I think it's time to call this meeting to order. Just want to welcome everyone to CPED committee this morning on this beautiful day. Oh, Tim, Councillor Ethit is calling me right now. Shall I take it?
You're on the air.
I'm assuming he's calling us to tell us he's running late. So let's start with the land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So just want to confirm, Simon, that we have quorum. We are ready to go. Yes? All right. Thank you very much. So let's call for the approval of the minutes. We have June 16th and 30th. Thank you, Sam. Second. Yeah, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. We have the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. And go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. We have a couple of requests. There is a request for an added item received from the clerk's office. That would be item 15.1. All copies have been circulated to members of Standing Committee for that motion. We also have a request to make several changes to the order of business today. There's a request that items 10.3.2, 12.11, 12.1.1, 12.1.2 be considered prior to item 10.3.1. As well, there's a request that item 17, public participation, be considered prior to item 12. Those are the requests received from the clerk's office as of this time for discussion.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, we need a 2/3 majority consent to move these changes. Okay, do we need a motion for that? Move that?
We can just make a general motion to, if there's no objections, to approve the agenda as amended as opposed to presented.
All right. Sam, you want to move that?
Move the agenda as amended.
All right. Second, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. All right, I think we have a new order of business. Thank you. Business arising out of the minutes. We have none. Call for declaration of conflict of interests. I see none. Motions for reconsideration, none. Motions for rescission, none. Consideration of deferred business, none. Notices of tabled matters, none. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Mr. Clerk, do we have any correspondence?
Thank you, Chair. Standing Committee has received one piece of correspondence that is related to item 12.1.1. That has been circulated to all members of Standing Committee.
All right, thank you. Petitions? Any petitions?
Thank you, Chair. None received through the clerk's office.
Thank you. Presentations, we do have presentations today. So the Seventh Step Society is going to be presenting later, and right now we have item 10.3.2, the Community Land Trust. We have Sarah and Kevin here from United Way who are going to present. So if you want to make your way to the front, thank you. And if you kindly introduce yourselves for all the people, and then we look forward to your presentation. And I have been advised that since we do have a packed agenda today, we are going to be monitoring the time very closely. So I think, Mr. Clerk, do you have that rule? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair and councillors. Thank you very much for having us here today. My name is Sarah Napier, and this is my colleague, Kevin Hooper, representing United Way Halifax and the collective of people involved in creating a community land trust here in Halifax. I will kick everything off with a couple of comments before turning it over to Kevin. Wanted to outline, as mentioned, we're going to spend some time today walking through what a community land trust is, what the benefits could be, and also some asks towards the end about how we would like to work in collaboration and continued partnership with HRM on this important work, including councillors who we know are passionate about housing along the entire continuum. If you look at the slide, you will see a listing of some of the partners who have been involved to date. Halifax Regional Municipality, Housing Nova Scotia, the Housing and Homelessness Partnership, United Way, the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Centre, the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Land Trust, and Davis Peer Consulting. Specifically from Halifax Regional Municipality, I would like to thank and mention Kate Green and Jill McClellan, who have been an active part of this work, and their expertise has been instrumental along this path. Also not listed on that page is the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation. So just as a note, they are a funder and a supporter of this process and work. This, we know, is a continuum that you are all very familiar with, the housing continuum that we all care about and want to address through different efforts. United Way certainly contributes along the way. We certainly look at issues of homelessness through programs that we fund, through service providers that we work with, and also through all the partnerships that we work with in community. And we also work on more interim solutions, such as tiny homes. We're working on several micro-shelter projects in collaboration with HRM Planning and other key individuals to make sure that those are good solutions on an interim basis. And we're also working on this facilitating the Community Land Trust project. So when you're looking at the continuum itself, we range from alleviation and immediate needs straight through to sustainability in the long term. We see the Community Land Trust as being a great vehicle for sustainability in the long term. And with that, and given our time, I'll turn it over to Kevin, whose expertise is deep in this area, to speak about the work in more detail. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody in this room we are in the midst of a severe housing crisis. In 2016, CMHC estimated that there were 22,000 households in core housing need in the city. In 2019, 69,000 people were recorded as living in poverty. And as of last week, 696 people were listed as actively homeless on the by name list, many of whom are unemployed and new to homelessness. I should say, too, that as of this week, 7 days later, we're at 705 people on the by name list. It's jumping week to week, month to month. It's double what it was last year at this point. So we're on a trajectory for increased problems. We need a systemic solution. We need to change the way we're doing things. The status quo simply won't do. Much of the issue that we're facing, of course, is based in systemic challenges. This, I think, in part, is related to inadequate wages and a rising cost of living. But it also has to do, I think, with an over-reliance on the private sector with respect to developing housing. That's resulted in an estimated deficit of 20 to 25,000 rental units in the city, which Turner Drake estimates that's what we would need to put us back in a kind of a healthy vacancy rate. Market dynamics are resulting in 3 affordable housing units lost for every one built across the country, and I'm sure it's similar in Halifax. And we just simply don't have kind of the active capacity at work to address it. The province has kind of backed away from their traditional role in developing new public housing. The private sector tells us that they are at capacity, pursuing developments that are in line with their business interests, and that there's a huge gap that they simply can't fill. And the nonprofit sector that in many respects has been left to fill this void is just ill-equipped to do it. They're overrun supporting people as that need increases. And as much as they are trying to support development, it's simply not in their wheelhouse, not expertise that many of them have, and it's a real drain on their resources. So we feel as though a CLT is a good response to these systemic challenges. So I just want to give a brief overview of the kind of basic elements of a community land trust. Fundamentally, they are nonprofit organizations that own and manage land and other assets according to community interests, often through a representative governance model. They prioritize affordability in most cases by holding community assets in perpetuity, thereby limiting inflationary pressures and reducing costs. They also have a long-term responsibility to those assets, which gives them incentive to maintain them at a high quality, giving quality of life to residents. They're typically place-based in communities and therefore reflect the needs, perspectives, and character of their residents. Finally, they're also highly adaptable. There are some fundamental key characteristics, but beyond that, they're capable of addressing a multitude of needs and serving a host of land uses, including rental units, master lease opportunities, low barrier home ownership, commercial space, community gardens, daycare facilities. Really, whatever a community needs that has a land use kind of component, they can fulfill. More importantly, perhaps, are the benefits that CLTs can bring. Again, affordability is key. As nonprofits operating at scale, CLTs can maximize efficiencies and reduce costs. The research we've done shows that CLTs often are able to reduce rental costs over time, as opposed to increasing them, which is what we see in the private market. They're a long-term investment in community housing, again, as opposed to what we are typically doing now, rent supplements, hotel stays, these kind of short-term fixes. Investments in community land trusts are long-term investments in community housing. They also increase neighborhood resilience, address issues like gentrification, and stabilize and preserve at-risk affordable housing, resulting in stronger, healthier communities. They support the nonprofit sector by providing reliable, appropriate, and affordable lease opportunities and allowing nonprofit agencies to pursue the work that they are traditionally meant to be doing, that is supporting their clients. Traditionally, CLTs have had a significant focus on housing equity with targeted investments and representative governance models. CLTs help address systemic housing discrimination. They build capacity, and I would say that that is one of our core focuses in the work we do, again, addressing this gap in the system. They put resources to work for community and increase the development service capacity of the nonprofit sector while providing residents with expanded life opportunities. And they provide home ownership opportunities in many cases through shared equity models. They provide low barrier access to home ownership with significantly lower than average mortgage default rates. And it's not on the screen here, but I also want to say CLTs, I think, are a complement to the existing system, not a replacement of the existing system. They can work parallel but autonomous from the private system, providing capacity for development while allowing the private sector developers and landlords to pursue their business interests. So through our research, we found a significant history and precedent that justifies the case for supporting CLTs. They grew out of the civil rights movement in the American South, and there are now hundreds of community land trusts across the United States, the UK, and Europe. Over recent years, as housing has become more of a challenge in Canada, they'd be popping up in cities across the country. We've studied community land trusts in Calgary, Hamilton, Edmonton, Parkdale, Toronto, and there are a few in our region as well. Upper Hammonds Plains, Beachville is developing, and one in Truro. But the CLT that we've looked into the most, and I think which really kind of proves the model has benefits, is the British Columbia Community Land Trust, which started in 1993 as an extension of the Cooperative Housing Federation of British Columbia. They started with 6 properties transferred from the province, and in 2012, through a partnership with the City of Vancouver, their capacity, their ability to develop and grow really expanded. They currently own and manage over 2,600 units, townhomes, high-density apartments, and cooperative housing. And they are pursuing the development of hundreds of new units per year. They simply just have the portfolio and the leverage to do it, and they compete in the market just like private developers.
1 minute remaining.
Maybe I'll skip that then. So the opportunity, huge opportunity in terms of the precedent in the model. We know that it's the model is supported by all orders of government at some level. CMHC has funded investigations, explorations of this model. Housing Nova Scotia is a partner in our project, and we know Regional Council endorsed Community Land Trust in the business plan this year. There's also alignment, I think, in the values and the approach of CLTs with Indigenous principles of land stewardship. We know there's funding available at multiple levels. And we've heard from community, housing agencies, financial lenders, and community groups that they feel as though CLTs can really fill the gap in our system. I think the private developers are key. We've spoken to many, and they've said they simply can't fill the gap in affordable housing. It doesn't align with their business interests, so they are in support of it. Nonprofits, being overstretched, recognize the benefit in resourcing an organization like this. They all say the status quo is unsustainable, and all believe that CLTs have the potential to establish an equitable foundation for reliable, long-term housing solutions. So our project started this spring. We did some research through the summer. We did some initial engagements. And into the fall, we'll be extending those public outreach efforts to share what we've learned about community land trusts, to get people's perspective on what it should look like for our community. And through the winter and into next spring, we'll develop some models, workshop those, and by next summer have a fully realized implementation plan that really is at the point of actionable, work as soon as we find the resources to do it. So from there, I will just leave it to Sarah, if we've got any time left, to talk about how council can support.
Just thank you very much, Kevin. And very quickly, some notes up on the slide. We're really keen to engage council in ways that are valuable for you to participate, including attending the consultations in community, championing this as a part of a holistic housing solution, which we know you're very passionate about in terms of housing and homelessness in this community, and this being a key part of that puzzle. And we also ask to consider in the future as it develops, to consider the possibility for investment into the Community Land Trust as one of many partners. We know that United Way will be considering private investment and being a champion of that particular route in. And given all the sources that Kevin has identified, we believe it could be a really robust and holistic solution as a part of the future of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so now we're going to be taking questions of clarification from council. Go ahead, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, and thank you, folks, for the presentation. This is exciting work. I very much share your conclusion about the problem that we're in. You look at the stock of Metro Housing, which was the original Community Land Trust, basically filling that role, and we have the same unit count as we did 30 years ago as we do today, but we have 100,000 more people in our city than we did back then. So, you look at that, and it's hard not to conclude where the seeds of much of our current woes stem from. My main question on this is precisely, my disappointment in the housing report that was done 2 years ago was that there wasn't a commitment from the province to actually start to fill that void in the market, because I don't think nonprofits can do it alone. This maybe is a way that we can broaden that, but I'm wondering what conversation has been happening with the province on this, because they really, really need to be here as part of the solution.
Housing Nova Scotia is part of our partner group working on this. I think where they stand at this point is somewhat in the background, waiting for us to kind of prove the case. I think that, I think they recognize the theoretical potential in the model. It's up to us, the core group working on this project, to kind of work through the details and come up with a model that is prove we can prove will function, that'll serve the purpose. At that point, I'm confident. They've certainly given us a lot of positive feedback on the ideas. I'm certain that they will see the benefit once we get to the end of this project and have a detailed model to invest in.
Okay, so early days at this point to say exactly what their role commitment might be.
Right.
Okay. I hope there will be a solid commitment there. Part of the problem is, as you just said, that it's on you to prove it. Like, this is a crisis situation. Anyway, I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Councillor Austin. Go ahead, Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And hello, Sarah and Kevin. So nice to see you here. As Kevin might know, land trusts are something that I've been interested in for a long, long time. And, you know, it's not just about housing, right? It's about where you create a land trust so that there's land for community benefit over changing circumstances in time, right? Whether it's a school you need a school and you no longer need a school, that land is in a land trust because maybe you need a seniors facility or maybe you're going to need housing. But by selling off our surplus land without that community benefit model or that idea of a land trust where the land is protected for the future for community benefit, I think we're setting ourselves up for challenges and difficulties in the future. So I'm very excited to see this idea come forward. In regards to housing, I agree. This, it's a systemic issue that we have. A couple of things I'm really interested in from your presentation were about home ownership versus rental. I remember back in 2015, 2016, CMHC did a study on rental versus ownership in Halifax, and we had, I think, the second highest rental to home ownership tenure in the country, next to Trois-Rivières. I believe that we had a lot of rental and not a lot of home ownership. And so home ownership is kind of an interesting piece, and you talked about that in your presentation, how a community land trust could help with home ownership, and I'm just a little bit more interested in how that would work, where you have the land for community use, but also home ownership. So there's that piece. The other thing is around the capacity building and how community land trusts might help with the financing piece. From my discussions with not-for-profit, housing developers, the major issue is around securing the financing to move projects forward. They just don't have access to the same financial resources. Through this model, will any of those barriers or challenges be addressed? And my third question, and I don't know if Kate might be able to help with this too, but I'm really interested to hear the ideas that are shaping up around the supportive policies at the municipal level. Like, what can we do within our municipal charter? What changes would we need to ask from the province to further enable us to advance this idea of community land trust? Like, where are we? Are we just kind of beginning to understand that, or has there been some thought, and how can we further accelerate this? Because I would love to see this model happen sooner than later, because I just feel every day, we're losing opportunity by not moving.
Maybe I'll start with the home ownership piece, and I just kind of give the caveat here that it can operate in all sorts of ways. There's multiple kind of financial calculations to kind of get yourself to a point where the housing ownership is accessible. But fundamentally, how it works is the community land trust owns the land and leases that land to a home buyer. The home buyer buys the actual facility, the actual home, and because they're only buying the home, not the land, the initial cost of investment is lower. Typically with community land trusts, there's also subsidies that come from government to kind of give people that opportunity. And the research we've done shows that once people are in those community land trust homes, they have that opportunity to build equity. They can live there for 5, 10 years, forever if they'd like. But there's a calculation at work that allows them to build equity through that ownership and ultimately sell that house back to the community land trust, pull the equity out, and move on to the private market if they'd like, and find other opportunities. That is what happens in the majority of scenarios. I think it's something upwards of 75% of people who buy homes within community land trusts then go on to have the opportunity to buy homes in the private market. So it's basically just opening the door for people who just otherwise can't find their way into the market. Remind me your second question. Rentals.
Well, there's the capacity building with the finances and also the policies. What do we need to do within HRM to further enable us to move community land trusts forward? And anyway, I really like your answer to that last question.
Thanks.
That was exactly what
Sorry,
I
I
was
forgot the
getting
second.
at. Thank you. No, it's okay. It was long. You've got to squeeze it all in there in the 5 minutes.
Through the chair to the councillor, Kate Green, Director of Regional Planning. So the question around what policies we have in place, the regional plan already has policies that are very supportive of affordable housing and looking at different models. We are also doing work on more of the program side with real estate, identifying lands that could be used for alternative purposes like this. So it's a part of our overall affordable housing work program to build more capacity using land. And then lastly, this project, the reason we're doing this project is to figure out exactly what policy change might be needed or legislative change might be needed to enable us to help or participate directly in community land trusts. And that's part of our work program, which the United Way is leading, is to figure out exactly what model is best for Halifax and what our role could be in that.
Right, and in all the things that you're doing, like, where does this fit with the regional plan review, or can it fit, like?
Through the chair to the councillor, this fits under our affordable housing program. The other piece of work I just want to mention is that we're also doing work on housing governance. Council's asked for a report back on new models of housing governance, and we've been working with Scott Sheffield on that report, and the Community Land Trust is part of that work as well. So it's filling in a few different places.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you, Councillor Cuddle, and go ahead, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. That I didn't know a whole heck of a lot about community land trusts, and so this has been quite fascinating to learn about. I'm going to sort of pick up where Councillor Austin dropped off. I can almost taste his frustration over on this side of the room. Because it is frustrating for us. It is very frustrating for us, and even more frustrating to hear that the province has, been presented with this information, they presented with this opportunity, and they're choosing to sort of take a step back and just wait and see. And it is frustrating to me that you folks have to prove it to them that this is, A, an issue, and B, something that can be a solution. And I think there are 705 people we could line up along Hollis Street that can prove it very nicely. I'm going to take the 30,000-foot view and go up 50,000, because listening to you speak about the involvement of the private sector in this, I've always had the struggle that housing can either be a human right or a commodity to be bought and sold. It can't be both. But it seems to me what you are presenting here is an option where it can be both. And so I guess my question to you is, can housing be both a human right and a commodity to be bought and sold?
I guess my short answer to that would be yes, as long as it's being bought and sold by an organization, an entity with the right values at work. It's just a matter, I think, of right now, we've just been on this track of increasing commodification of those resources with very few limitations and very few other actors in the system operating according to a different kind of set of motivations. So I mean, it goes back to Councillor Catel's questions. The Community Land Trust operates very similar to a private developer. That is the capacity we're building in the system, building a portfolio, giving them leverage to go out and pursue opportunities kind of at a competitive level, so that they're not waiting for government grants. They're not, kind of delayed in their response to market opportunities. But once they do have those, the commitment is forever. The commitment is to hold those and manage them in a way that serves community interests. And that doesn't mean that there's no growth in value. That doesn't mean that there's, severe limitations on what they can do. Like I said, it's a highly adaptive model, but it just ensures that some portion of the real estate and infrastructure assets in the community are retained to serve the community's interest. I think, we've just been, somewhat like coddled too long and had far too many opportunities, and it just wasn't really, necessary for us to kind of think too hard about this. But we've gotten to a point of very limited thinking with respect to housing. We need to think to kind of crack that open and reassess the values that kind of underline the system. I do want to say the province, as much as, in some ways they are in the background of this work, they are supportive of the model. And I do think that one of the things they're waiting for, and with respect to some of the kind of resource opportunities, they're waiting for a mechanism to flow those opportunities through, and in a way that is equitable, in a way that's going to kind of get them distributed across the system, as opposed to, in a sense, picking winners and losers in a kind of a competitive kind of system with limited capacity. That is the real value, I think, that we see in this. It sets up a foundation of assets that every nonprofit and many people who are looking for affordable housing can take benefit from. It kind of deploys those in an equitable way. And when I say equitable, our intention will be to do that with respect to the kind of challenges, proportional challenges we're seeing in the system. So addressing issues of systemic marginalization for historically marginalized populations. Really targeting our response to those issues.
Appreciate that. I like this. I like this a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Councillor Blackburn. And welcome to CPED, Councillor Mason. The floor is yours.
Good to be back. It's like a special guest presentation of a former cast member. Thank you so much for this. Very brief question. So, we were talking a little earlier about the lack of resources that we see a lot of the not-for-profits have, and in the past, sometimes to get to that 20 or 25% equity that would trigger financing with CMHC support and all that kind of stuff, it would be the feds or the province or the municipality giving them the land. Now, in this case, the land goes to the trust and is held by the trust. So is there a mechanism for being able to still leverage the value of the land when you're going to get financing to build the building, or is that then taken off the table? Because I can see, I absolutely, we had a presentation at the Housing Congress here, I think it was. It might have been the one in Montreal the year before, about 5 or 6 years ago, and they talked about the Housing Trust in upstate New York that's been around forever, around I think Burlington and across the Champlain Lake there, and they're very, very successful multi-generational housing trust, and I think that's exactly the kind of model we need. But I'm wondering about how do you get over that hump in terms of having that initial equity that allows you to finance? Thank you.
It's a good question, and I can't say that we've sorted it all out, but I do think there are multiple sources of acquiring property, acquiring assets, especially in the early term. The surplus lands, I think there's also opportunities in terms of kind of estate planning. We're in a situation right now demographically where there are a lot of people holding a lot of assets kind of, at the end of their working lives, looking for ways to kind of, contribute back to community. We know that there's fundraising opportunities. We know that there's foundations that'll support this. My hope is that we establish that foundation early and then are able to move on to work independently. That, once we have that equity, we can then move on independently and pursue opportunities on our own.
I see Jill's here to add clarity.
Yeah, so through the chair to the councillor, I'm Jill McClellan. I'm a principal planner with social policy. And just further to what Kevin has already very well answered the question, CMHC will often see long-term leases as a form of equity for the property. So that sometimes, if you have those long enough term leases, that can still work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have Councillor Cuttle back for a second time. 3 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It was about just a question about the long-term leases. I know in BC, they have a long-term lease housing model where people get long-term leases for 99 years. So it's like home ownership, but it's not home ownership. And you can actually, I think, sell your interest in the lease if you want to move on. Have you looked, I'm just really curious about how that model might be applied here. Is that relate to community land trusts in any way, or do you have any more information on if that would be something that we should be considering here and how that works?
Again, I'll say, we certainly haven't kind of sorted through all the details. The Community Land Trust in British Columbia has been our main point of contact. They've been very candid and sharing information about how they operate. And, most of the models we've looked at do operate according to that kind of long-term lease option. So it's definitely something that we will intend to pursue here. Whether or not there's policies that will need to be kind of adopted or adapted to kind of facilitate that, I'm not exactly sure at this stage. I think that's in part, why we have the support we do through the partners at the table. Part of the reason we're speaking with orders of government to kind of sort out, what are the mechanisms to really make this work. But, that long-term lease opportunity is key to this, for sure.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I'd love to talk more about this, not here, because I only have a minute and 20 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Sarah, United Way Halifax. Thank you for your leadership in this and for, moving this forward. Excellent, meaty presentation. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. Okay. Yes, colleagues, we're moving on. Item 11, information items brought forward. We have none. And then we are moving to item 17, our public participation, and we have one person or two people signed up. Laura Hines-Jenkins, Director of Government Relations, and Gita Kulcheski, Vice President, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, Finance and Administration from Dalhousie. And just a reminder, we give 5 minutes for the public presentation, and our clerk will monitor that for you to give you the 1-minute warning. And thank you so much for being here. When you're ready, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I'm Laura Hines-Jenkins, and my colleague Gita Kulcheski and I are here today representing Dalhousie University regarding Agenda Item 12.1.1, the staff report on potential heritage resources on university campuses. We have also submitted correspondence, which I believe each of you should have. Dalhousie's location in Halifax is an integral component of our value proposition, and we highly value our relationship with HRM and long history of collaboration. Together, we have championed many joint initiatives and found opportunities to collaborate on shared priorities. Both Halifax and Dalhousie have seen notable growth over the last several years and anticipate significant population, workforce, and economic growth going forward. For example, Dalhousie's Halifax enrollment grew by 12.7% over the last 6 years and currently stands at just over 20,000 students. As the largest post-secondary institution in both Halifax and Nova Scotia, Dalhousie is a significant draw, bringing in young people from across the country and around the world. This talent pipeline also attracts new companies to the area and supports Halifax's candidacy for flagship employers. Where Nova Scotia's ability to grow is inextricably tied to Halifax, Halifax's ability to meet its economic and population targets requires continued growth in the post-secondary sector, including at Dalhousie. It's on this basis of shared history and aligned growth ambitions that we approached our engagement with HRM heritage planners. Unfortunately, this broader context was not considered as part of this report. For that reason, Dalhousie does not support the report as currently written and respectfully requests that this committee and ultimately Regional Council reject staff's recommendation in favor of a more fulsome and strategic collaborative process. Dalhousie's concerns center on two things: whether the report adequately responds to the premise and intent of the originating motion, and the lack of consultation centered around strategic planning for the preservation of heritage assets in the context of planned municipal and university growth. The 2019 motion directed staff to outline approaches and risks to developing a policy for institutional heritage assets. This directive is broader than the scope of the report ultimately prepared. Although the staff report notes that Regional Council was seeking to understand the impact of heritage registration on the ability of educational institutions to expand, adapt, and carry out their mandates, the report does not include any analysis of this impact. It is Dalhousie's position that the full implication of mass heritage registrations cannot be known without this dialogue. In our view, this requires a more multifaceted and strategic dialogue that starts from a shared commitment to preservation of historical assets, but strategically and practically considers this in the context of economic and population growth needs. Our understanding from planning staff is that they consider this to be outside their mandate and beyond the tools at their disposal. Dalhousie has a long-standing commitment to preserving heritage assets. We have voluntarily preserved and maintained numerous historic buildings, investing over $25 million on exterior building envelopes since 2006, and preserving historic elements even when doing so was more costly. We plan to invest a further $26 million over the next 10 years. Mass registration of low-density, inaccessible buildings, absent consideration of the impact on other strategic priorities, will significantly hamper Dalhousie and Halifax's ability to meet growth targets and misses the opportunity to make collaborative, nuanced commitments that would truly ensure the objectives are met from perspectives of both preservation and growth. Growth on the scale Halifax is experiencing requires balance. We would welcome a fulsome and nuanced conversation that prioritizes preservation, but also acknowledges that preservation is not always practical or in the best interest of the university or the city. We believe the recommendation in this report runs counter to the city's stated economic and population growth goals and counter to the spirit of the Halifax Higher Education Partnership MOU. Further work is required to present a solution that meets shared preservation priorities that are practical, maintainable, and aligned with HRM and Dalhousie economic and population growth targets. Again, we request that this committee and ultimately Regional Council reject staff's recommendation in favor of a more fulsome and strategic collaborative process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of clarification? There's no questions of clarification for public participation. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and sharing. Appreciate that. Are there any other public speakers present who would like to join the public participation? Asking for the second time, any other speakers who would like to speak? And the third and final time, any public speakers? Nope. All right. Do we close the public speaking? Can I have a motion to close? We don't need a motion to close. All right. We just move on to the next staff report, which is item number 12.1.1, case H00501, potential heritage resources on university campuses. And I see we have Seamus and Aaron here to give a presentation. Welcome. Thank you. And when you are ready to go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Seamus McGrail. I'm a heritage planner with the Heritage Property Program in Planning and Development. And here to present case H00501, potential heritage resources on university campuses. So this report and presentation before you today stems from a motion of Regional Council from 2019 in May, requesting a staff report to outline approaches and risks to developing an educational institutional heritage policy for educational campuses. The original motion stemmed from a previous report where staff was instructed by Regional Council to look at potential heritage resources within the downtown plan area. One such heritage potential resource was the Medjuk building, and While staff was preparing research and evaluating the Medjuk building for its significance, Dalhousie University contacted Regional Council, and the council passed this motion to defer the consideration of this particular building as a heritage resource until the motion in this staff report is considered. So in its deliberation around the motion, Regional Council expressed concern that mere ownership of a potential heritage building by an educational institution does not necessarily protect the building from demolition. With the ongoing expansion of post-secondary educational institutions on the Halifax Peninsula, building stock within historic neighborhoods, as well as significant historic institutional buildings, have been demolished in recent years. Given this trend and the inherent risk to potential heritage buildings, Regional Council expressed an interest in identifying potential heritage buildings on all university campuses for possible registration as heritage buildings. In particular, the many institutional buildings designed by famed architect Andrew Cobb were noted in particular as potential heritage resources. So this report in motion took a broad approach to educational institutions. Educational institutions in HRM include the Halifax Regional Centre for Education, the Conseil Scolaire Acadien Provincial, private schools, which there are many, NSCC's campuses, NSCAD University, and the university campuses on the Halifax Peninsula and Mount St. Vincent University. Staff did do an initial scan of these campuses for potential heritage resources and determined that the universities on the peninsula include the most potential heritage resources in terms of number, age, architectural merit. NSCAD also includes some heritage resources, mostly all already registered, such as the Granville Mall location. NSCC, no real potential heritage resources. Private schools include a few. The Conseil has probably one, and HRCE has many potential heritage resources from the mid 20th century that deserve a second glance. But really, the universities were amongst the educational institutions with the most potential heritage resources that staff identified. So this report focuses on universities for that reason. Historic university buildings represent an enduring commitment to education, research, and community. These resources should not be viewed merely as bricks and mortar or outdated systems. The conservation of these heritage resources can continue to inspire students and to remind alumni and community members of their important values. University campuses play a role in community life. Their prominent locations within neighborhoods offer opportunities for inspiration, education, work, and leisure. Although usually distinct from the fabric of their surrounding neighborhoods, universities' campuses are important architectural assets contributing to the heritage character of their surrounding area. As universities develop their existing campuses, their heritage resources are at risk of demolition. Universities also continue to expand the footprint of their campuses by purchasing properties in surrounding neighborhoods. The significance of historic residential building stock and its integration with new development is also an important consideration. So really, the message here is there's really two typologies of historic university buildings. One is the traditional institutional heritage buildings, such as the Dalhousie College building here on the left. The second is these traditional residential buildings that are added to the stock as campuses continue to expand beyond their original footprint, such as the building on the right here. So the Heritage Property Program does operate a registry of heritage property. We conduct, the Heritage Property Program conducts activities such as research and evaluation. We have a full-time researcher on staff now. We use heritage building evaluation criteria. Owners of heritage property are given an opportunity to speak to Regional Council directly at a hearing in favor or against any heritage registration. Registration is applied under Section 17 of the Heritage Property Act. And if a building is registered, an owner can still make an application to demolish it or substantially change it and it's at the discretion of regional council ultimately to decide whether the building can be demolished or changed in any way. So it's entirely at the discretion of regional council. Section 18 is a limitation in the Act. It states that if council says no to a demolition request or a request to substantially change a heritage building, the property owner can still carry out that demolition after 3 years. So this is a limitation within the Heritage Property Act. 2 forms are attached to title when registration occurs, and we also have grant and public education opportunities. And educational facilities will certainly be interested in public educational opportunities that the Heritage Property Program offers in collaboration with them. So the Regional Center Plan does have policies, existing policies, adopted just last year around educational institutions and major institutions such as university campuses. The policies really come down to 2 policy objectives: support the intensification and orderly growth of major institutions. So educational institutions are defined as major institutions in the Regional Center Plan, adopted just last year in 2021. And improve access to major institutions that support complete communities. This idea of complete communities is one of the 4 pillars of the Regional Center Plan. The Regional Center Plan seeks to support complete communities around institutional campuses. The plan describes complete communities as supporting people of all ages, backgrounds, abilities, and incomes to sustainably live, work, shop, learn, and play near one another. The regional center is comprised of many distinctive neighborhoods, some of which are already complete communities and others with some components of complete communities in place. It's the intent of Regional Council to the Regional Center Plan, to strengthen the existing communities and enhance the elements that make a community complete. The plan particularly identifies housing affordability and the total number of heritage properties and their adaptive reuse as key performance indicators of complete communities. The Regional Center Plan also includes a heritage policy, CHR 10, which indicates that a municipality may collaborate with community partners, including educational institutions, to create an inventory and assess potential and cultural and heritage resources and consider their protection through registration under the Heritage Property Act. The regional plan for the entire region includes a very similar policy, CH5, which encourages the activity of inventorying and considering properties of potential heritage value on an inventory as registered heritage properties. So this activity is well supported both in the regional plan and in the Regional Center Plan adopted last year. In terms of a policy for educational institutions, the municipality's educational institutional heritage policy is well established in the Regional Center Plan. It seeks to encourage the intensification and orderly growth of educational institutions while protecting heritage properties that support complete communities. There is a perceived risk that heritage registration will limit potential for intensification and growth of educational institutions. However, there are processes under the Heritage Property Act, as discussed, and land use incentives under the Regional Center Plan and land use bylaw that allow for the alteration, rehabilitation, and adaptive reuse of registered heritage properties. The recently adopted Regional Center land use bylaw increased development capacity on all university campuses within the regional center through new zoning, which allows greater flexibility in carrying out their economic mandate. Just to give you an example, the Carleton campus of Dalhousie University, the height maximum was increased from 70 feet to 70 meters last year. This means 70 feet you can build a 7-story building, 70 meters you can build a 24-story building. This change was made just last year on the Carleton campus of Dalhousie University. All the other campuses, heights increased from 3 to 7 stories to 9 to 24 stories through the adoption of the Regional Center Plan. The growth mandate of university campuses was considered and facilitated through the adoption of the Regional Center Plan. These new maximum lot coverages and height permissions encourage the expansion, densification of university campuses. However, this new development capacity also places heritage resources at greater risk of redevelopment. There is a pressing need to identify and protect heritage resources on these university campuses, which could encourage their potential integration into larger developments. There's also the Heritage Development Agreement Policy, CHR 7, adopted last year with the Regional Center Plan. This Heritage DA policy allows property owners, including universities, to collaborate with the Halifax planning staff to enter into a development agreement which may even allow for greater development potential above and beyond the limitations of a land use bylaw. So if there's registered heritage properties, we can consider a development agreement that could allow for development potential and uses above the limitations of a land use bylaw. The municipality administers a grant program, which if universities have properties, buildings in residential or commercial use, they may benefit from. It may be a drop in the bucket in the budgets of universities, but it could encourage the restoration of key features, architectural features on heritage buildings. We also are involved in public education. We try to educate the public about the heritage resources. We launched a web application recently for the Downtown Halifax Historic Neighborhoods app, which educates the public about the significance of heritage buildings. And this may align with the educational objectives of educational institutions. In terms of the approach to the policy that is presented to you, the report identifies 42 potential heritage resources dating from the late 19th and first half of the 20th century, located on properties that are part of university campuses within the Halifax Peninsula, including Dalhousie University's Carleton, Studley, and Sexton campuses, King's College's Andrew Cobb buildings, AST's original college and library buildings, and SMU's McNally building. The majority of the potential heritage buildings identified in this report are located on Dalhousie University campuses, with only a few identified on the other universities. Staff have met and discussed this inventory with all of these universities subject in this report, and have heard varying degrees of concern and support. Staff are currently working with King's College and on their support for this initiative. Attachment A of this report identifies 24 potential heritage buildings as being exceptional and potentially deserving of formal recognition and protection based on their architectural merit and heritage value and setting in the community. Just to give you a sense of the significance of these heritage buildings, the Dalhousie College here, this building here, this is the twin sister of City Hall. This building was designed by J.C. Dumeric, who was the business partner of Alfred Elliott, who designed City Hall. It was designed and built after Dalhousie College sold this property that you're sitting in today to the city of Halifax in the 1880s. Dalhousie went and built this building in a style very similar to this one, and it's essentially an identical building. It's essentially the long-lost twin of City Hall. The Nova Scotia Technical College was built in 1909 to establish a new educational institution in Halifax. The Science Building was the first building built when Dalhousie purchased farmland to the west of its original campus and began what became Studley campus. Sexton House was built as the first home, designed by Andrew Cobb, was built as the first home for the president of the Nova Scotia Technical University. So each of these properties tell the story of the evolution of these campuses. To lose one of these buildings would be to greatly affect that narrative and that story of the evolution of these universities. University staff members participated in the recent Regional Center Plan planning process which resulted in increased overall development capacity on all 6 university campuses, supporting their ability to expand, adapt, and carry out their mandate. Municipal staff will request an opportunity to participate in upcoming campus planning processes by requesting information, providing comments, and making suggestions. Are there opportunities for the municipality and neighbors surrounding the campuses to plan with the universities to identify future expansion areas? We've heard from community members that they're finding out about university expansion through land acquisition and demolition permits. Are there more appropriate ways to involve the public in these growth plans? Buildings in Attachment B may also be deserving of protection, but may represent growth areas if these buildings fail evaluation for heritage registration. So heritage can be one consideration in determining where appropriate growth of these campuses can occur outside the existing footprints. And this is just a cross-jurisdictional scan that staff conducted looking at other historic universities and whether or not they have legal protection on their historic buildings. Staff determined that of the buildings that staff looked at, McGill, University of Ottawa, Laval, University of Toronto, and Queen's University have between 75 and almost 100% of their historic building stock registered. And we assume that these universities like McGill and U of T are carrying out their economic mandate and operating successfully with all of these legal protections on their heritage resources. If all of the buildings in Attachment A happen to become registered in the future, this would bring the protection of universities in the regional centers, their protection from 9% up to 61%, right behind Queen's University. There are other outstanding applications to register university property. So community members have come forward to ask for HRM to consider the registration of 3 properties in particular, 1245 Edward Street, 1460 Oxford Street, and 1322 Roby Street. So these properties were left off our list, an Attachment A of this report, because they're coming forward in a separate process under the heritage applications. So the Edward Street property will be going to Regional Council for a hearing on September 27th. The Regional Council will consider that property for registration. The other properties will be going for evaluation with the Heritage Advisory Committee, likely in the coming weeks or month. In conclusion, the municipality's educational institutional heritage policy is already well established in the complete communities, institutional employment, and cultural heritage policies of the Regional Centre Plan, recently adopted just last year in 2021, and in the cultural heritage policies of the Regional Plan. This plan facilitates the intensification and orderly growth of university campuses and seeks to protect heritage properties. Heritage building protection and the adaptive reuse of these buildings are key elements of the complete communities surrounding these campuses. Historic university buildings represent an enduring commitment to education, research, and community. The majority of the 9 historic universities in Canada that were reviewed by staff include legal protection for most of their heritage building stock. The mere ownership of a potential heritage building by an educational institution does not necessarily protect the building from demolition. Planning for the conservation of heritage resources can serve to protect, strengthen their sense of place while enabling necessary change and growth of the educational facility. Staff recommend that the potential heritage resources listed in Attachment A be researched, evaluated, and if worthy, considered for heritage registration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the committee? Go ahead, Councillor Austin.
I'll put the motion on. It's just as soon as I scroll up to it. It's recommended that Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council initiate a process to research and evaluate potential heritage properties identified in Attachment A for consideration for registration as municipal heritage properties in accordance with the Heritage Property Act and Bylaw H200, the Heritage Property Bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Blackburn, and thank you to staff for the work that has gone into this. You know, when I think about these questions of heritage, I mean, I think the point is made. Like I think of SMU. I think of the loss of Bethany House, right, where you had this building that was extremely valuable in terms of the heritage context of our city and social history, and the university, despite pleas to save it, tore it down to turn it into a sidewalk, and I think part of the site is now parking as well. Just a horrible loss for the city to have had that building go. So just because something's owned by a university doesn't necessarily mean that it will continue. So I think like just assuming that a university means that these buildings are necessarily safe, especially for the smaller ones, is not a given. And some heritage registration is not necessarily mean, well, you can't do anything with this property. I mean, it's interesting actually, since the center plan has come in, that we have private property owners that previously, like I think of United Church up there in the North End, where the property owner initially opposed heritage registration, but then the center plan came in, and then they looked at what the incentives would be, and then they turn around and actually applied to register the building, right? So, I mean, it's not that when a heritage building means that it's forever frozen in time and, you can't do anything with it. It just means that there's some additional steps, and you don't have the same free-for-all rights that you necessarily have when it's not registered. So I'm in support of what's before me. I understand, I think it's somewhere in my calendar. I'm going to be sitting down with the folks from Dal to hear their side of things in more detail. But for now, at least carrying this forward to regional council makes sense, because I don't think it's a one-sided thing that just because a building is registered that then suddenly the university is blocked from doing anything useful for it in the future. And I think we probably do need a better conversation around planning for university expansion. I think I'm trying not to get into saying too much about 1245 Edward, because it is the subject of an upcoming heritage hearing. But we can't keep doing things in that kind of manner, where it's buy property and then demolish, and then try and beat the clock like a private developer would, right? So, I mean, I think we have to, on all sides, do a little bit better here in the city in terms of doing campus planning and thinking about heritage. So I'm okay with this moving forward for now, and I look forward to a conversation with Dal to hear what they have to say afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Go ahead, Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A very interesting discussion this morning at CPED here. I am a graduate of Dalhousie, actually from the School of Planning, and we talked a lot about heritage preservation and conservation in planning school. I actually think Dalhousie has a lot of internal resources to tap into to come up with a comprehensive plan about how we prioritize preservation while accommodating growth. And some great thinkers like Jill Grant and others in that faculty. I think, understand the pressure of the growth versus preservation argument here, right? That the campus does need to expand. It's always easier to demolish and build from scratch than it is to preserve buildings. But what really is concerning me is when you see the campus encroaching into the city streets. So, there's discussion of what happens on the campus, and then there's discussion of what happens on our streets in our city as the university begins to alter those streetscapes. Part of the great charm of coming to Dalhousie, which is why I'm in Halifax actually, was the city, was the historical city. And, I think finding ways of protecting and enhancing and finding adaptive reuses for those buildings is not just an asset to Dalhousie, which I fondly part of, but the city as a whole. And it does deserve a more fulsome and strategic collaboration. I 100% agree with that, and we should sit down and come up with a plan, because it's not just the university that gets impacted, it's the residential areas as well. I just have a question for you, Seamus, about the zoning. So when you look at the zoning map and you see kind of the UC, I think, is it UC1 zoning encroaching into the ER2 or ER1 around there, what happens when the university acquires a property in the ER zone? How does it become a UC1?
For the question, through Madam Chair. The regional center plan and land use bylaw were adopted just last year. So those university zones were brought into existence and created in consultation with the university staff just last year. So any properties that were owned by a university surrounding the campuses were given that zone just last year. If going forward, when the universities purchase properties now, they'll remain in the ER1 zone until there is a rezoning application made or a land use bylaw is considered for amendment after a 5-year review. They can be brought into that zone. But there's some process, public process would have to happen to change the zone from ER1 to the new university zone.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, so like Councillor Austin, I am in support of this report that's in front of us now, but do welcome those further conversations and collaborations with Dalhousie, to find that right balance between, the prioritization of preservation and accommodating, the continued growth and success of the university communities. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Go ahead, Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to be here talking about this after all this time. Certainly, I have 5 degree-granting institutions in the district, and we play host to about 30, based on the presentation or the submission from Dalhousie, now probably far more than 30,000 students coming in September. I wanted to just read to Council what the purpose of the Heritage Property Act was, because I was, as the communication was coming in from the university and other folks, I was reminded, so what is our duty here? What are we actually being asked to look at? And the purpose of the Act is to provide for the identification, designation, preservation, conservation, protection, and rehabilitation of buildings, public building interiors, structures, streetscapes, cultural landscapes, areas and districts of heritage, architectural, or cultural value in both urban and rural settings, and encourage their continued use. So that's a big part of it, is to encourage the continued use. So we need to have that flexibility, and I think that we're going to be able to deliver that. It's interesting to hear Councillor Cuddle say, we have 2 Masters of Planning graduates in the room and a political science grad on this council. So good job, Dalhousie. You've had a real impact on the city, and we appreciate that. I quote the Act because I think it's important that we frame, our job right now is, are these important pieces of heritage based on the rules of our bylaw and in the Act? And I think they are. I think what staff did with the A list and then the B list for further consideration, that we've actually got the, here's the things we're sure of and here's the things we need to have more discussion about. And I look forward to having that conversation. But I also want to point out that there is a huge dynamic in my neighborhood, in my district, between the residents and the universities, going back to the 70s when Dalplex was built on the other side of South Street, and the letter that Alan Heyman, whose house backs onto that property, who lives on Oakland, will show anyone whenever there's talk about Dalhousie opening its footprint, that there was a commitment to the community. Dalhousie wouldn't get any bigger south of South Street than the land they're already on right now, and he's going to defend that to his dying breath. And so it's a dynamic conversation that we have to have, and the citizens, I love Dalhousie. I own a house literally a block from Dalhousie. I know about, students and the impacts of that every day, especially last Saturday night was fine. But that conversation has to be had, and we have a role in that when it comes to that. How big does the university get, and how does it get bigger? And we've had some of that, as Seamus brought up, the center plan. The carrot in the center plan is much larger by right rights have been conveyed to Dalhousie in those zones that exist now. Whether those zones expand or not, to Councillor Cuddle's question, is a very public discussion we're going to have, and it's a rezoning that would come to council, if that is going to be allowed, is a question. It's not a when. And so I'll just close in saying I agree absolutely with Dalhousie's submission that we need to have a conversation about the specific issues. Where does the Heritage Property Act fall down for institutions, if it falls down? What are specific concerns Dalhousie and the other universities have? I know it's about, what's this going to cost us, and will this slow down the speed of change? Is there a huge administrative overhead? But again, our job is to encourage the use of these properties. So if we need to make changes, and indeed, and I am going to push back on Dalhousie, I called the Associate Vice President, who is responsible for government relations, in November, and we talked in December of 2021 about this exact issue. I tried to have this collaborative conversation with Dalhousie. It hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen now. But it can happen after we register them, right? We can register these properties and protect them and continue to go together to the province to get any changes to the Act or internally to change our bylaws. So I'm encouraged to see this here, and I'm glad to hear so far the committee supports this, and I look forward to putting this to Regional Council. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Okay, thank you, colleagues. I don't see any more speakers on the list. Are we ready for the question? All right. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. All right, thank you very much. And we are moving on to item number 12.1.2. This is our update on the African Nova Scotian Road to Economic Prosperity. So I will invite our guests to the front for this. I see we have several presenters, so I will let you all introduce yourself to the committee, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Awesome. Good, they're good to go? Awesome. Okay, go ahead, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of this committee. And I want to welcome you to the Road to Economic Prosperity Update presentation. My name is Dolly Wins, and I'm the co-chair of the Road to Economic Prosperity Advisory Council. Our members have contributed a lot of time and energy over the past years, and we have made substantial progress moving items from action plan forward. But there is still a lot of work left to be done. Today's update will highlight both of these facts. We want to make sure that we call attention to and explain the progress that has been made so far, that it can act as a model for others. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present here today. I also like to acknowledge the fact that we have today with us with us today is Tamar Brown, who is a senior analyst with my throat's dry. And so I also like to have Caroline Wright and Janine Jarvis, who's sitting back there, who work with the Halifax Partnership. And also I want to welcome my good friend here from the Halifax Partnership. Since launching this work, we have worked jointly with the HRM planners and department heads and discussed and implement activities within the plan. I'm going to pass this over to Caroline and Tamara for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors.
Okay. Yeah, you're on.
Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors. My name is Tamar Pryor Brown, Senior Advisor of African Nova Scotian Affairs Integration Office with HRM within the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I'm also a member of the REPAC Advisory Committee and Community Capacity Committees. And I just want to touch on that African Nova Scotians are a distinct founding people in our community who have contributed to and have been a key part of Nova Scotian culture and history for over 400 years. The historical stronghold of our ancestors' fortitude provides the backdrop on which we often lean, and our ancestors' labor, heartache, rich culture, traditions, and unwavering strength created the foundation upon which we now stand. When we call on our ancestors, it's to bring to the present the collective victory that can help us in the face of challenges. We ask our ancestors into this space today to lead us and to guide us all. One aspect that is key to this economic plan is that it's community-owned and led. It's a community-owned and led economic development action plan, and is the first of its kind in the province. Our advisory committee has been tasked with leading and implementing this plan, and we have representatives from each of the historic communities across HRM, from the province, and we have HRM's support and other organizations' support, such as Engage Nova Scotia, Inspiring Communities, and sponsors like RBC. This plan is built on and continues the work done by the countless generations of African Nova Scotians who have come before us. And we acknowledge that African teachings, strength, and perseverance continue to challenge and inspire our communities. In the words of an African proverb, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulder of many ancestors. So a quick review today. The Halifax Partnership and HRM's African Nova Scotian Affairs Integration Office in the past have hosted consultations with community to better engage and connect. During these sessions, there were themes that came from the engagement sessions, and they turned into what now we refer to as the pillars, the 3 pillars of the program. So the 3 key economic development themes include the need to build unity, capacity, and leadership among and within African Nova Scotian communities, and that will ensure that as the community grows, it will continue with new leadership and skills available to maintain that growth. The second pillar is the issue and challenge of establishing land ownership and developing infrastructure within African Nova Scotian communities, and the need to improve education, employment, and entrepreneurship also is the third pillar that outcomes for the African Nova Scotian community. So touching on some of the key milestones here that you see on the screen that have taken place since September 2018 was the establishment of the advisory committee. And our committee is made up of members of community, representatives from organizations focused on the growth and the development of Nova Scotians of African descent. And within this group, we have built subcommittees around each of the priority pillars, as well as additional committees on research, communications, administration, and planning. And these groups have helped us develop individual work plans for each of the pillars, as well as separating those issues that run through all of our work. In 2019, we saw the development of the engagement strategy, and all the way to 2020 with supports and Halifax Regional Council endorsement of the African Nova Scotian Road to Economic Prosperity, as well as Council approved the first community action plan together with the Beachville community. We see how important buy-in and collaboration are to this work, not just from the municipal government, but from community and our supporters as well. And as you can see, I'm not going through each and every one for the time constraints. So one of the things that's very important moving forward are the development of some councils. So the first one I'll touch on is the Elder Council. It's actually the first of its kind in Canada, and they lend and provide their lived experience and guidance and their expertise to this work, which is so crucial. And I'm going to touch a little bit more on them in another slide. So the Road to Economic Prosperity hit the ground this year and presented to folks in Truro, New Glasgow, Yarmouth, Digby, Shelburne, North Preston, as well as to the Associate Deputy Dwayne Provo from African Nova Scotian Affairs with the provincial government. Equally as important as the Elder Council is the launch of the Youth Council that took place this summer, and what an insightful group of youth with representation from across the province, the diaspora, as well as Caribbean representatives. you'll be hearing from them. I think council will be hearing from them in the near future. That's one of their goals. You're already gone to the next slide. Wonderful. So this is actually a picture of the Youth Council. And like I said, there is representatives from across the province, and I think more continue to be added each time from each of the historic communities. Back to the Elder Council. I'm so sorry. And there's a picture of the Elder Council. Sorry, I should say some of the Elder Council. This was during the launch, and a few of the folks hadn't joined yet at that point. There was still recruitment taking place. And the eldest member of the Elder Council is Miss Eliza Brooks. She's sitting there in the middle, and she is 103 years old. So she's going to give us some incredibly lived experiences. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'm skipping around here on Carol Ann, so I apologize. So I'm just going to read the names of the Elder Council, if I may. So we have Darlene Lawrence from Digby. We have Cameron Brown from the Caribbean. Charles Shepherd is our representative from Cape Breton. Miss Iona States is from Beachville. Louise Delisle, the South Shore. Melinda Day from Halifax. Craig Smith from Halifax. Olive Phillips is a Caribbean representative as well. Lavone Sparks from Halifax. Glenda Talbot Richards from Northern District. Chuck Smith from the South Shore, and Shauna Paris-Hoyt from Halifax. And as I indicated, they're going to provide their lived experiences to guide this work forward. They're also going to review and approve the terms of reference, and they use 5 elements for developing African Nova Scotian communities, because African villages are circular, which speaks to the continuity, alignment, and interdependence that we have. And it's the first element of unity, and unity is about how we organize ourselves as a community. Sorry, go ahead, Caroline. And I think it's over to you.
Okay. Which button do I?
That one, and when it turns red, you're ready.
Okay. Am I on? Okay. Can you hear me? Thank you. My name is Carol Ann Wright. I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Capacity Building for the Halifax Partnership, also part of the staff group that leads the work on the Road to Economic Prosperity. I'm going to be our presentations are usually an hour, so we're packing a lot into this time, so I'm going to breeze through a lot of this. We are really happy with the progress to date. Our community is happy with it as well. And the first thing that we'll talk about in terms of an update is our community boundaries progress, and our work with Gail McLean in this process has been excellent. So as you can see on the map there, the green outline is where Beachville is, and you can see where the boundary, where our boundaries are going to be hopefully next year. So the community has worked really hard on this boundaries process, put a lot of rolled up their sleeves, did the work with the help of HRM planners who we value greatly, Gail in this particular piece. And so that's one of the accomplishments in terms of the work between the partnership, between HRM and Beachville, and also the partnership's work. So that was the boundaries piece. This is a process of surplus lands, which worked really well with us in terms of Mike Vale with surplus lands. We've been able to identify, I think, about 12 parcels within the community that used to belong to the community that were now being transferred back for various things of recreation, community gardens, and I think some heritage spots as well where the oldest school were. There were a couple of spots where the old school were with the community identified. And for this, and the community are the ones that have identified this through a process we developed with Community Rocks, with the planners that are attached to the Beachville work, would come out on a regular basis, walk through the community, begin to identify, talk to communities, and we really appreciate the work that staff has done with that. And so at this time, I'm going to acknowledge the planners. Beachville says our planners. We know they belong to you, but they've become familiar with the community to the point where the community looks for them now. Ann Totten, Gail McLean, Miles Agar, Sean Gillis, Kate Green. And there are others as well. As the work progresses, whatever business unit that the community thinks will be helpful, come out. So this process is working really well, and it helps the community move along. So this transfer of lands has been really inspiring, not just to the community as it stands, but also to our youth who have seen erosion of the community, and seeing this progress move forward has really changed the dynamic in community in terms of the work that is being done and that needs to be done. We have been able, in tandem to, we've done the Beachville Industrial Park, and the naming of the street was the second piece that needed to be conjoined with that, and that it's happening. We just found out that it has been passed by council that Beachville Industrial Park is a name change. So we want to thank you for that, and the community that has been for years wanting this to happen. This is also a major thing. So the community is really, as I said, very inspired by all the accomplishments as we move through this. We've been able to also establish a zoning roundtable with the Beachville community to be able to establish commercial, just where the zoning is going to be in terms of housing, commercial, et cetera. And one of the biggest things around that process is not to have any more industrial development. We think we've had enough. And the community is really excited about being able to zone, because of the land that's coming back to community as well, and with our boundaries, be able to really reimagine what our community will look like presently and in the future. Excuse my voice, I don't know, it's really growly today, but I don't know what's happening. We also work Upper Hammonds Plains, and it was really nice to listen to the presentation on CLTs, because that's where the community is going in terms of being able to manage land in communities. Beachville has collective property as well as individual properties. So land trust will go a long way in terms of supporting how the community wants to hold its land and have some control over what is sold. The CLT provides another option. And so historically, when you see land gone for tax sales, particularly in Black communities, it's been really hard for communities to recover from that. The CLT actually provides an option for that as well. So land trusts are a really exciting tool. And as you can see with Upper Hammonds Plains and the Melvin Tract, and I know that Council Blackburn, I've seen you out at Upper Hammonds Plains at meetings and supporting the community in their development of the work similar to Beachville. So as we work and we accomplish things, it really inspires other communities to do the same thing. So we are really happy to be part of that process. And those are just some of the zoning issues that Upper Hammonds Plains has raised. And we know that they have a planner working with them as well. And we work to have this resolved to the community satisfaction. I'm not going to go through the Elcoma. I think they've done a presentation with you. And we usually do the Elcoma presentation when we go out, because they're part of the flagship work that we do and support. Excuse me, but they've been into you, and this presentation is available if you need to see that. We're going to talk a little bit about the ongoing, as we continue to do the work in HRM, we have to do the work in the province, because as you know, jurisdictionally, as HRM, we understand how finances and human resources are used, but the African Nova Scotian community sees themselves as a collective. So the population, we can't do work in Halifax and not do it in the regions. So what's been exciting about that, that's probably why I'm growly. I just got back from Amherst. We were in Cape Breton and Amherst doing the presentations. And some of the things that people ask is, so, well, how did you get the municipality engaged? So it's that we're able to talk about as well. And so they're using this as an example of how they can get engaged with their municipality. And they have two ways to join this work. One is that, and we can help them engage their municipality based on the work that we've done, or they can join the advisory council, the elder council, or the youth council. So there's many ways they can be engaged in this process. And they're just excited about the work, particularly when we talk about Beachville and Upper Hammonds Plains, and those things are moving. And those policies we've been able to have impact on. So, so by the end of this month, Lucasville will have started their community planning process. And that sometimes happen, as we talked about the process of community action planning, which is being approved, I think, next week, Kate? I think there's a hearing. Is she gone? So you're here. 22nd. Thank you. I knew she was here somewhere. So Lucasville will start their community planning, and what they were excited about is that that's now coming up for reading, and the fact that communities will have it, and once they have their strong community plan, they will have access to HRM through the community action planning process. And this is really good for all communities. Upper Hammonds Plains will have completed a strategic plan. We will be doing that by the end of the month, and that's the work that Janae and I, who's sitting back there hiding, will do with Upper Hammonds Plains and Lucasville. And Beachville will have updated their strategic plan. So we are always excited to help communities develop a plan, and really, it's exciting work because they now see what can happen. So East Preston, North Preston, and Cherry Brook are also they're on the agenda. They have some preliminary work to do, along with Maroon Hill and Africville, in this visioning work, and they want to kind of do that in context with Road to Economic Prosperity to make sure they're not disjointed, because we know there's a visioning process. So they're really trying to make sure that it's encompassed in the work that we do. I think, boy, I ran through that really a lot quicker than I thought.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee. I'm Wendy Luther, President and CEO of Halifax Partnership, Halifax's public-private economic development organization. On behalf of Halifax Partnership, I want to take this opportunity to thank Dolly, Caroline, Tamar, and of course our colleague Janae Jarvis for today's presentation. The Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan was created to increase economic opportunities and improve quality of life outcomes in African Nova Scotian communities across HRM. As we see from today's presentation, the work that is being done by the community, in the community, has made considerable progress in advancing the plan. Development of the Road to Economic Prosperity was a priority in Halifax's 2016 to 2021 Economic Growth Plan, and is supporting its successful implementation is a key action within People, Planet, Prosperity, Halifax's new inclusive economic strategy for 2022 to 2027. As we enter the last 6 months of the 1- and 2-year action plan, work is now underway to complete a new 3- to 5-year action plan. We will be coming back to CPED and Regional Council this fall with an update on the expanded plan. I want to thank the Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan Advisory Committee and chairs Dolly Williams and Irvin Carberry for their incredible leadership, along with HRM. My colleagues described here how the impact in HRM is expanded across Nova Scotia, and the team has been very humble in their comments. This is indeed a groundbreaking approach to economic development in community, and the first of its kind, not only in our city and province, but across Canada. And I just so applaud the work of community in making these bold steps, and HRM's vision in supporting it. And we do this work with many partners, including RBC, who had the vision as a private sector funder to get on board early on in the plan and its implementation, along with the province of Nova Scotia. I also want to take this opportunity to invite you to the Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan Summit on October 21st at the Prince George Hotel. It's an opportunity to hear about the work and progress to date and bring the community to the table to discuss priorities, partnerships, and opportunities to get involved in the work. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. We have Councillor Blackburn. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and no questions, just a heartfelt thank you so much for this presentation and the work that you are doing. It it is inspiring other communities right across HRM. I just had a meeting in Lucasville last night. This was discussed, and coming up in October at Northwest Community Council, we're getting a report on land uses for Lucasville, with the vision being that we're going to look at industrial uses, agricultural uses, and mitigating the conflict between community and land uses. So, the work that you are doing is inspiring others, and glad to hear that you're working with Gail on the boundaries, because reestablishing the historical boundaries of Lucasville is probably the most satisfying thing I have done in my 6 years on council. So thank you so much for your work and your presentation here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Go ahead, Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I just want to thank everyone for the presentation today. It's, this is something that we have been supporting at Council, and it's really fabulous to get an update, and I think it's incredibly impressive when you look at the timeline that you presented of the milestones, of just how much work has been done over the last few years in really pushing things forward. And I know that in community development work, it's a lot of pushing and heavy lifting to get things to the point that they're at today. So I think everybody on the committee and on the councils, the youth council, the elder council, everyone should be commended for the hard work that they've been doing. Just listening about the Beachville boundary discussion, and that's one of the things that I have an interest in District 11, in that Beachville has traditionally been kind of contained most recently in District 12, and now we're looking at expanding it to District 11. And I'm trying to figure out how I get more engaged in this dialogue. In fact, I didn't even know much about this until just in the past 6 months, which I was like, wow, my gosh, there's all this work done, and there hasn't been the communication and the connections there. So I just want to say that I would really welcome that, and like to be more actively involved and engaged, because it's one of these examples where without that communication and that connection, there's different conversations going on, and it's like, whoa, we need to put this, we need to get everything on the table so everyone can come along together on this, because it is amazing work. So I hope to be more engaged specifically in that piece over the next little while. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. And thank you again for your presentation. It was really good to get an update and to hear the amazing work that is being done. So thank you again. Thank you. All right. We now are heading to our second presentation that is scheduled for today, and that's the Seventh Step Society.
Madam Chair, just before we begin that item, we may wish to, or we're close to 12 o'clock, consider just putting a motion on the floor to extend the meeting time, just so we don't interrupt the presentation in order to do so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cuddle and Blackburn, for that. So welcome to the CPED committee. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Go ahead when you're ready, and if you could please introduce yourself for the committee. Thank you.
All right. So my name is Landon Morton. I'm better known as Morty. I work with Seven Step Society of Nova Scotia. I'm the vice chair. I work with a couple other community organizations as well, some that were even mentioned earlier today. And I myself am somebody who has had conflict with the law. And that is basically kind of what Seven Step is about. But the slideshow will show more, and I'll go through that. Seven Step Society of Nova Scotia. So land acknowledgement was already done at the beginning of this meeting, so I will just quickly say that Seven Step Nova Scotia, all of our work is done in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And, you know, I know this isn't on the slide, but when we think about criminalization and things like this, they're often attributed to, well, you get it. So, to colonization, right? So I think it is important to acknowledge that when we do this work, right? So what is the seventh step? Okay, so to reduce recidivism by getting those in conflict with the law to think realistically about their behavior in order to change their thinking and make necessary behavioral and lifestyle changes. So what we do, we have a weekly support meeting, and that's just once a week, and that's comprised of volunteers and people who have had conflict with the law. And so people can share about their week, talk about their day, get supports and things like that. And some of the volunteers are people like lawyers and things like that. So I myself got my lawyer through Seven Step Nova Scotia. We also have a board of directors, which I'm on. I'm the vice chair, and we now have some people who are employed with us. So we have Chloe Bramble, the BIPOC program coordinator, Nancy Everson, the peer support coordinator, Stephen DeVoe, who's the executive director, Robbie Reed to my right, who's a peer support worker, and Shirley Tuplin, who's also a peer support worker. And so some of the things we do is go to the courthouse and talk to people directly. And see if there's anything we can support them with, things like that, whether that's a support letter or whatever it is. If we can't do it, we'll try to reference them to somewhere that can. Sorry, I'm not good with computers. So some of the programs we offer are the street group meetings, as I already mentioned, and then we have peer support training, which I'm very excited that we're going to be actually doing that in some First Nation communities throughout the province. So in the peer support training, we talk about things like boundaries, things like, sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but there's a lot of things we talk about. There's it's like a 21-hour thing. Not all at once, obviously, but we talk about basically how we can support each other in healthy ways, right? Because sometimes there's a thin line between helping and harming. Then we have the Taking Responsibility Healthy Relationships workshop that started out west. And then we have outreach presentations, reintegration, and then the Futures Youth program at NSCC. So what we're here for today is we're hoping to get funding for peer support clothing to be worn while doing outreach and representing our organization in the community. So basically, say when we're at the courthouse talking to people and say somebody's friends like had heard about somebody who helped them, if they don't necessarily know what to look for, then they're not going to be able to find us, right? So just one second. So and a couple more things to say. Actually, I'm going to let Robbie take over. And
he's just doing that because he's saying a couple of my points, and I'm very shy and I'm not good at this. I've been institutionalized most of my life. I got out, I heard about 7 Step last time I got out, but then I got got out this time and I really want to change. And they have offered me a lot through the group. Then I did peer support training with them. And then they offered me a job. And then Mainline offered me a job. So his idea was, I was going to say too, was not just anybody will come up to me, right? Like, so when I'm out with clothes on, like he said, if someone hears about it, they'll come over, because I'm a really good talker to people that's had my same kind of lifestyle. And I really, really want to, I don't want to be dark no more in my community. I want to be light. And I'm trying to do positive things with these people. And a lot of people have been calling me like, oh my God, Robbie, if you can do it, I can do it. So it's a great organization, and it does really help people. Like, I feel like I have a community of strength. And I never ever learned the stuff that they've taught me in programs in jail. It's not the same. So I owe 7-Step a lot. Go ahead.
So to talk a little bit about myself as well. So I mean, I'm relatively young. I'm sure you can tell that from looking at me. But in most of my life, I've been the youngest in most circles I've gone to, whether that was living on the streets, the youngest in a shelter, whether that was the youngest who is in a board meeting now, right? So things change quite a bit, right? Or the youngest person in palliative care at the hospital, right? There's a very big contrasts in my life, and I owe that to the organizations like 7-Step and, you know, other community-based organizations, some that were mentioned here today, right? So I know it's not really a huge ask we're asking for, is money for t-shirts, but I think it'll go a long way into getting our name out there and helping other people. I was also wanted to touch on this very briefly about the history of 7-Step. So 7-Step started in the United States in San Quentin Penitentiary by, I forget his name, but it was brought to Canada by Bill Sands, I think, or maybe that was the guy in the United States. I'm not good with names. But it was brought to Canada in like 2013. It restarted up in Canada, but it started in like the 70s or the 90s in the States, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Robbie. He just
Never
needs his
mind.
mic. Yeah, go ahead.
I got dumb talking. I'm sorry. Just, we really want to, there's a lot of people out there that need help, right, that ain't asking for help, but if you offer it, like they want it, I'm scared to ask, so I think it's a good idea. Sorry our presentation wasn't a little better. We were just throwing this on us. No one wanted to
it's
come
great.
before. Okay, thanks.
It's great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being brave and speaking. We appreciate that. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Morty. That's awesome. So we have some questions on the floor here. So go ahead, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, and thank you for coming in today to share info on this program. I hadn't heard of it until today, but you know, I also know that work is really important. I mean, we're very much in a housing homelessness crisis now, and I know just from the little experience I have just in encampments in my district, there's a very clear relationship between folks who have been in the correction system, in the justice system, who are then out living just roughly in an encampment somewhere out there. And so it's not an easy life, and certainly anything that we can do in that regard, I think, is a very positive thing. As a society, sometimes our priorities are so out of whack. So, you know, the practical ask here, do you have an idea as to like, well, how many t-shirts are you talking? Do you have any kind of amount that you're looking for from us? Like an actual budget, a dollar amount?
I think we will need t-shirts for like 5 people, right? At the beginning, and then I think we might be able to source the money after that from elsewhere. So I mean, that's really not a whole lot, right? But I'm thinking
a couple $100, $1,000 for a whack of shirts, something like that?
I'd say a couple $100, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so my suggestion, just looking around the room, is I think we can do this. Each councillor has a district capital fund, and to me, I'd be more than happy to kick in some money from that if T-shirts are, you know, fit the financial rules for how we can use those funds. I mean, this isn't a large ask, and I think if we just pass the hat around, the 16 of us, I think we can buy you all the shirts you're going to need for a little while. So. That would be my suggestion to colleagues.
I concur. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Austin. Go ahead, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And yeah, just to piggyback on what Councillor Austin was saying, I've been working with Doreen Carter from Seven Steps Society for several years now. And I mean, I don't think you should take more pride in what you have been able to accomplish, because just the stories that Doreen tells me, this group is life-changing. It has changed lives, and so every year or so, Doreen, I think you have regular fundraisers, and so I've been supporting them. But I think what I'll do is reach out to Doreen and say, listen, girl, how much do you need? And then I'll just send out an email to everybody, and just you know, we'll make the collection, and we'll get it done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Go ahead, Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Blackburn, for that suggestion. Then, you know, very supportive, and I'll wait for the email to arrive. I just want to thank our presentators as well, because, you know, your presentation was great and it was heartfelt, and you know, to come and share, you know, first-person experiences and stories is really important, I think, for us as a council and as councillors to get that perspective and to understand, you know, what programs like this mean. You know, Robbie, you said something that really struck me, that about people wanting help but not knowing how to ask for it, and when, you know, they're offered, they take it. And I think that was kind of profound in what you just said there, because it is so true. I mean, for so many reasons, people don't ask for help, whether it's pride, whether it's shame, whether it's just not simply knowing, you know, where to go and what to ask for. And so having a group that is there to offer that support when people are in usually, you know, desperate need is a service not only to the individuals, you know, and their own health and well-being, but I think to our society and our city as a whole, right? Because we're only as healthy and well as our citizens, you know. So you know, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for taking the time and sharing this with us here today at CPED. And you know, I wish you guys all the best and luck in what you're doing. And yeah, I'll look for Councillor Blackburn's email. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. You guys are heroes. Thank you for your courage in coming and speaking. And that was by far the most powerful presentation I have experienced here at Council in my 2 years, so thank you. Okay, colleagues, yep, you're done. Yeah. All right, you guys, we are moving on. 12.2, members of standing committee, we have none. 12.3, Community Design Advisory Committee, we have none. 12.4, Heritage Advisory Committee, none. 13 motions, we have none. In camera, we have some minutes to move. Yeah, Councillor Austin, would you like to move those minutes? Do we have a seconder on those minutes? Okay, excellent. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. All right. Notices of motion. No. Okay, well, it looks like we are on to the date of our next meeting. Oh, you do have, oh, we have an added item. Oh, my dear, it's highlighted here too, sorry. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Blackburn.
All right, added item, I'd like to move that the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report, the purpose of which is to consider amendments to bylaw N200 respecting noise to establish end hours for construction-related noises related to concrete pouring to be 9:30 p.m. from Monday to Friday. I so move.
Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, yes, we had a most robust discussion about noise previously, but I think we can probably add this in the category of unintended consequences, not realizing just how much science goes into construction, especially with concrete. It's been pointed out to us that concrete needs some time to cure, and restricting the construction-related noise hours to 8 p.m. for construction or for concrete work could make it impossible to get a day's worth of good weather and curing time in. So this is just asking for staff report to explore what can we do with this, and you know, so we don't cut them off at the kneecaps while they're trying to do some good concrete work. So just looking for support on this, and I'll surrender the chair to Councillor Mason, who can probably explain what's going on a bit better. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Blackburn. I'm very familiar with concrete pouring and curing, having had the construction we've had in District 7, and the humidity or the temperature can impact how long it takes for the process to finish. And so if the fans and the machines that are going whoop, 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 that are going over this, you know, the floor plate as it's curing are shut down because of the noise bylaw, you know, well, they can't be. The concrete will be ruined. They'll have to chisel it out and start again, which will create more noise and longer construction times and an incalculably higher costs. So what happens is if we push it back to 8 o'clock, often concrete curing is done before the deadline, but sometimes if the conditions go a certain way, our staff might even be like, okay, you can go an extra 15 minutes, 30 minutes. If it's an hour longer, our staff are going to say, don't let that happen again. But when we push it back to 8 o'clock, suddenly 15 minutes longer is 8:15 instead of 10 o'clock at night or whatever. And so what I've heard from both construction industry representatives and from some of the developers is 8 o'clock means that you know, with strict enforcement would mean that the subcontractors would just not pour on some days with certain conditions, and the work would just keep getting pushed farther and farther out. I don't think that was an intention. The noise of concrete curing and pouring is substantially less than a hammer being banged or a truck going beep, 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 backing up. That would stay the same. But this one particular piece, which is driven by chemistry and the environment, I think we need to review. So thank you for your indulgence, committee, for allowing this to be brought forward.
Our pleasure, Councillor Mason. Go ahead, Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I have a bit of concern about this motion because I feel like it might be trying to, you know, find a solution to a problem, but it's not enough of a solution to deal with the problem. You know, in what was brought forward before around the noise bylaw, there was the ability for builders to apply for a special permit to extend hours. And my concern here is that just extending it to 9:30 is not enough. Like sometimes with concrete pouring, once you start, particularly if it's a larger project, you're going to go beyond 9:30 anyway. Like you're going to, you know, from the developers that I talk to, sometimes this can go till midnight. The thing about concrete pouring is that, you know, in the construction project itself, it has a beginning, it has an end. It's not like something that is necessarily going to go on for a year, right? You pour your concrete, you're done. But that 9:30 isn't going to be the solution to the problem. So from what I understand right now, And I asked about the burden of applying for a special permit, like how much of a burden is this going to be? I was speaking with Kasia yesterday about this, and she's like, well, we don't know yet because we haven't tested it. It might be easy, it might not be easy. But even if we go to 9:30 and they need to go longer, they're still going to have to apply for a permit. So, you know, the intention of this, I get, that we've identified that there's this kind of one issue around concrete pouring that we need to find a solution to. I just don't know if this solution and extending it to 9:30 is a better solution than what's already in place in applying for a special permit, which people will have to do anyway, because I just don't think 9:30 is quite enough. So there was there is the option of creating some kind of a generalized permission for concrete pouring that wouldn't have a time limit, or some other options. So, my only problem with the motion is that we're being very specific at 9:30, and if we're asking for a staff report, I'd like it to be a little bit more open-ended in considering all the options we might have for accommodating concrete pouring.
And I see we have Councillor Mason here to respond. Go ahead.
So the request specifically came from Peter Pauly and Alex Haloff, representing UDI. It came in another meeting. What they said basically was 9:30 is enough for most projects, and that ones that needed it would apply for the exemption. Then you apply that to talking to Tanya Phillips in the bylaw enforcement, who said keeping it at 8 o'clock means almost every single construction is going to apply for an extension just to get to 9:30, and that the administrative burden is going to be significant, right? That they don't want to do that. So the idea is you push it back to where it used to be, where, in my experience with the hundreds of projects that have been built in District 7, it's very rare that they go past 9:30. And when they do, there was an application for that, though no one wanted to come to council and go through that administrative burden and actually go through that process. And we've created the out so that they can do the administrative application. That being said, when you're hard up against residential areas, I'm not convinced that I would want to allow them to go past 9:30 on the regular. I think it has to be a special case. But again, that's why we have to ask for a staff report, because the legal review was that it is a new, this is a new initiation that can't kind of piggyback on the discussion we already had, because we've closed the discussion by voting on the bylaw at council. And so staff will be able to come back and answer those questions that Councillor Cuttle asked, in the staff report. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, are we ready for the question? Okay, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. All right, it has passed. Great, thank you. Now I think we're on to the date of our next meeting. Yes, all right, October 20th, 2022, and we are adjourned. We have a call for an adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day.